In this video, we're going to learn about building with Hyper-Adobe, a dirt cheap, do-it-yourself technique that my friend Dan used to build his one-of-a-kind tiny home. Like many others, Dan dreamed of escaping the system to live a debt-free, off-grid life. However, as a musician and a poet with no construction experience and almost no money, he had to dig deep and come up with a creative solution to make his dreams into a reality. He decided to learn how to build with earth bags and Hyper-Adobe, and after 3 years of hard work and determination, Dan has achieved his goal. What he created is inspirational, and I wanted to be the first to share his story. Dan's sense of humor is contagious, so I jumped on the opportunity to interview him. And honestly, it was the most fun I've probably ever had shooting a video. So in just a second, I'm going to pass the mic to my friend, so that he can tell us what he learned over the last 3 years building his Hyper-Adobe home. Plus, all the tracks in this video are his original songs, so if you want to check out his music, you can find a link in the description below. Lastly, if you're new to the channel, we have a lot more inspirational and educational content like this, including some fun and informative offerings we have on our website, like the new Earthship 101, a beginner's guide. So if that's the kind of thing you're into, then consider subscribing, and be sure to click the bell to be notified when new videos are released. Don't forget to share this video with a friend if you think it'll brighten up their day, and as always, if you have a question or just want to say hi, you can find me in the comments section below. Enjoy.
I'm alive! Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. It's a great day to be a cloud in the sky and wonder why I came all the way out here. Dang it. Wait, so, you're gonna interview me? Yeah. What do you want me to say? Hi, I'm Willy Wonka. This is my Wonderland. Hi, I'm Dale Earnhardt. This is my race car factory. This is where we grow the tumbleweed. I just came out and started digging. I knew absolutely nothing. I'd never held a circ saw. I had never hardly used power tools. All I knew was dirt plus bags is somehow gonna equal house. Was paying a lot of rent, just stressed out, you know, just like you have to really work to sustain yourself when you're just trapped in the matrix. It just sucks. Yeah, so I wanted to escape. I just wanted to get out of you know, this boring, contrived, typical life and spend less time working and make less money and need less money and simplify my life. You know, COVID hit and the pandy hit, and I just lost it. All my plans fell through, and it's just a familiar story. And luckily, I got some sweet money from the government. It was almost like the government was giving me a severance check. It was like, here's the money you need so that you don't need us anymore. Even though I didn't have hardly any money to start, I think I had like maybe $1,000 starting out and just coming out here and digging. Yeah, the only thing that was here was a meditation circle and the loop, the driveway loop, and a pile of wood chips. That's where we slept. A little meditation circle over there. This is now our kitchen. I was camping out in a tent when the first month I came out here, and I'm doing a bunch of sage bundles. I was just totally preoccupied with that for like an hour, and this huge dust devil comes and just like it's like a tornado, and I just ducked, and then I didn't think anything of it, and I just kept doing sage bundles for another hour. And then I looked back to go home, or like go to the tent, and it was gone. completely vanished within all line of sight.
With all your belongings.
All a guitar in it, camping gear, everything, notebook, everything. I needed a quick win. I needed to get out of the elements. And after living in a tent for 3 months, I was like, I really want to just be inside sometimes. So I decided to go with the Super-Adobe below grade and put the house 3 feet below grade because it helps moderate the temperature. It is more stable. I also just like the way a subterranean house feels. Totally just something I sketched up in my notebook. I actually got the inspiration from Cal Earth and this guy named Harry who actually built a bunch of earthbag domes right in my neighborhood. So my first thing I did was just get out here and just build a test wall. And I love this test wall so much because every mistake is in here. Every mistake that you could possibly do with earthbag. Well, you notice at first it's just totally wonky. I didn't use a compass at all. I put the bags right side up, which is more inefficient than turning them sideways. When you turn them sideways, your bags become 2 to 3 inches higher. Yes, your wall is slightly less wide, but you don't need that much Adobe. It performs really well as a thermal battery, even at 11 inches. I didn't use enough barbed wire. I actually initially built this wall a little bit higher, and it started getting really wobbly. I could just push it and it would just wobble and feel like it was gonna fall over. I initially came out and I just chalked the perimeter of where I wanted the house to be. I actually used caliche, which is this white-like material. Compressed volcanic ash is very hard. It's almost like cement. It's very hard digging. And I thought I could dig out this whole house myself. And I got a few weeks into it and I threw my back out and I was gonna give up because I had no money. The house needed to get dug out with a backhoe. I was in a motel. I was like, what am I gonna do in my life? And I asked my best friend at the time, can I borrow 10,000 bucks? And he said no. And then I was like, oh, what am I gonna do? The next day, the PUA money hit. It was back pay plus 600 for each week. Yeah, like six grand, 7 grand just hit my account. And I was like, all right, we can keep going. So basically, yeah, we're 3 feet underground, subterranean right now. Grade is about up here. So what dictated a lot of things in this build was having to put the windows above grade. The windows being as high as they are, that also dictates how high the ceiling is going to be. Actually, if you think about it, having the house lower made me have to have higher ceilings. Mm-hmm. So it's more work. Yeah. It's more work. It's okay. It's okay because it's worth it. It worked out all right. I love high ceilings. I tried to use feng shui, sacred geometry, just the numerology the whole time. And one of the favorite things I did was just concentrate on 3. Triangles remind me of 3. 3 big windows looking right at 3 peaks. 3 sets of windows, 3 rooms in the house, things on the light fixture, 3 fire pits, 3, I could go on. So I tried to just make it really how I would want a house to be and just customize it and make it really fun too, and not be too serious about it either, and just not really take myself too seriously. Like, look, I'm still technically building a tiny house. It's not a big deal, you know. Yeah. It's not that big of a deal. Yeah, it's gonna take 3 seasons to work on and finish, but yeah, it's not that big of a deal. It's just a house anyway. But I don't think there's any house in the whole world that I've ever seen that is kind of like this. This house is very unique. Not many people are doing Hyper-Adobe in the first place. Hyper-Adobe that I ran after I went above grade was continuous, porous, but still plastic. Similar to like oranges, grapefruit, citrus at the grocery store. That kind of food grade mesh. You can get a roll of that, very inexpensive, and I use less than 2 rolls for the whole house.
What?
I think for Hyper-Adobe bag material, I spent maybe like $70.
How many dollars? Like $800?
70 or $80. Yeah.
So dirt plus bag equals house.
Dirt plus bag equals house.
Dirt plus bag really does equal house.
Yeah, and with the earth bag, individual bag, I would say pounds. And you do technically tamp both, and that's a huge part. You have to do that. But when I think of Hyper-Adobe, I think of like a lay or a snake, like a big earth snake.
It turned out that Dan wasn't the only one building with Hyper-Adobe in his neighborhood, and luckily for him, they were thinking about how to make it faster and more efficient. So Dan attended a community workshop where he learned how to make a DIY low-tech tool called a Hyper-Adobe Ninja, created by this guy, John Paul Garland. So if you want to learn more about that, you can go to adobeninja.com, and I'll put a link in the description. But for now, I'll let Dan explain the rest.
So this is an Adobe Ninja. It has an earth bag funnel attached to a dolly, and this is what we use to do Hyper-Adobe. And basically, it's just a bunch of cheap stuff from Harbor Freight. But it's a funnel that's specifically made for earth bags. You can find that on Amazon for $60. It's a dolly from Harbor Freight, and it is just a bunch of scrap wood. So the timeline, basic timeline, is me coming in May, digging all May, then about to give up, and then hire backhoe in June, have first work party at the last day of June, complete all the bag work by October. But in August, I cap the dome.
Last bag for the dome, and we're gonna fill it right now. You guys ready? Last bag.
And then in November, I got roofed in. Barely, just in the nick of the last day of the metal on the roof was the last 50-degree day or something like that. It was like, we were just like,
Yeah.
busting butt and stressed.
What was it like at that
Thanks.
moment when the roof went on? What about that day?
That was one of the most epic days, hoisting these huge beams.
Yeah, your beams are gigantic.
It took 12 people to lift one beam. And I could not have done it without community, without support.
I started out with love. Now I'm just picking it back up. You see, I can't help but change. Don't see how people.
Earth building, natural building is a community activity.
You know, I love Dan's story because it's inspirational and heartwarming. However, we filmed the interview once the house was already finished, and I'm starting to realize that in order to teach you about Hyper-Adobe, we're going to have to turn the clocks back and fill in some of the gaps. So in order to do that, I'm going to have to bring Dan over to explain some things for you.
Oh, hey, neighbor. These are my 10 steps to doing Hyper-Adobe. Okay, let's break it down. Error. Step 1, plan and design. Step 2, gather materials. Step 3, mix soil. Step 4, get your buckets. Step 5, wet the wall. Step 6, lay that bag. Step 7, compass and adjust. Step 8, tamp. Step 9, compass adjust level. Step 10, final tamp. So plan and design is a really fun part, dreamy part. And what's cool about Earthbag and Hyper-Adobe is you can make any shape you want to, circle, square, octagon, so it's really fun to get creative and play around with, numbers and geometry. Just have fun with that is the main thing, and that'll inspire a lot of the next steps to happen. Gather materials is pretty simple and easy. You just get a pick, shovel, tamper, and just a few really basic things, and you're off and running with some, buckets, So now it's time to prepare your materials. Mainly you want to sling the mesh on the funnel gently as not to rip or tear any section of the mesh. If you do rip or tear, I find it easier to just go ahead and cut your losses, cut the mesh, and then start getting to work with that. Don't forget to tie a simple square knot at the end. Ideally, you will sling enough mesh on here to run out an entire course. Step 3 is quite easy. I have a special method where I let the water soak into the soil overnight, and if you do that right, then you'll have a very little effort when you come to mix your soil and work the next day. Okay. So really, you need to get a pile of soil together. I advise doing that with a backhoe. It's kind of a drag having a big machine. You can also do it by hand if you really want to, but once you do have your pile of soil, you're going to make it into the optimal moisture content for Hyper-Adobe. So what you need to do is ideally pre-wet it the night before, but I did not with this batch. So you want to just fill up a bunch of 5-gallon buckets of water and dig trenches. So you get your mattock and you're kind of creating like a moat like situation so that the water can just sit in here and sink down in this little layer. And then you get the pick and mattock and mix it up, and you're constantly throwing water on, mixing it to get to kind of like an oatmealish, dry oatmealish like consistency. This clumpy bit is too wet. That's too spongy and it's going to sink through the mesh. But something like this, that's really what you want.
Yeah, that's nice.
Once you got your soil mix correct and feeling good, you're going to just put it in some buckets in preparation to lay the bag. Bucketing is very simple. I advise just, using your hands and getting on your hands and knees and just filling that bucket with your hands, bare hands, for just a few seconds, and it's faster that way. Wetting the wall when it's necessary. You could actually just pour the water right on the wall, or you can use a splash brush to save water. And then you lay that puppy. Oh yeah. Okay, you're just pouring the dirt from the buckets into the funnel and then shimmying that right along. And that's how you keep on trucking. So I condensed a lot of steps into step 6, laying the bag. At first you need to sling the mesh on the tube, and then you're going to stage the buckets, and there are certain techniques to shimmying and shaking the Hyper-Adobe Ninja along and keeping the workflow going with your team. And when we're staging, we want to stage it so that the bag drops right where we want it to start. And because the soil is moist and we've wetted the wall here, it binds. Each layer binds to the other layer, creating one big monolithic shell structure. And we want to have enough room behind the Ninja to climb up and be able to start it, and also be able to grab the soil that we need to get it started. Then you compass. This is dictating the shape of your structure. So once you've laid a course, you want to then center it on the wall so that it's ready for tamping, and level it. A general sense of level, because this is flexible form architecture. We can kind of correct our mistakes, but we allowed ourselves a lot of flexibility in the previous courses. So now we need to be more stringent and detail oriented towards the end. And we're getting to the point where the whole project would be level. So the roof will be less problematic to put on. So once you've adjusted the bag and compassed it, you'll want to start tamping. I usually prefer lighter strokes to big, heavier strokes, especially at first. One, because the bag is still a bit vulnerable. You don't want to have any rips or tears. This first tamp is just a pre-tamp. Ultimately, you'd like to go around and tamp 3 times. Tamping is kind of exhausting. It's nice to share it, the workload with other people. So protect yourself while tamping and release the grip right as the end of the stroke happens when the tamper hits the bag to avoid hurting yourself. It's also a really good idea to wear closed-toed shoes while you're tamping. And then you'll return and compass again. And then, coming back, compassing, adjusting, leveling again. And tamping again, shouldn't really take too much time. Slap that bad boy. The hardest time, the hardest one. Do it again. All right? But don't forget, clean that tamper, Don't let that earth accumulate on there. Don't forget to scrape your tamper. Of course, before and after all these steps, you'll want to revisit your plan and your design. This can be a lot simpler than you think. Keep in mind, you can do Hyper-Adobe without a ninja, with just mesh and a funnel. Here's my friend, and he's going to show you exactly how you do it, but basically you're making an individual bag and tying it off after every time you fill the funnel with soil. That way you can get started with this stuff yourself and with almost no money. You're not done. Just keep that in mind. Once you have finished your Hyper-Adobe, you do want to plaster it as soon as possible to protect your work. Your bags, your plastic will degrade from the intense UV of the desert sun or wherever sun you are. And so there is special bags you can get that are UV resistant, but I advise just going ahead and no matter what, just getting it covered. It's not very hard. Adobe is a little bit of earth, sand, and water. Yes, optional fibers with straw and such, but with just those 3 ingredients, you could cover and protect your Hyper-Adobe. So you can see how we have plastered the Hyper-Adobe. That was the first priority. Now we're going back and getting a thin slurry coat on the Super Adobe or the earth bag. One of the benefits of the Hyper-Adobe is that you don't have to do this. You can just put in your plaster right from the start and it'll stick to the earth through the mesh. So this is what a first coat of plaster looks like on Hyper-Adobe wall. And below it, we just have a basic slurry that covers the bags just to protect it. I think we did that by hand without a trowel or anything. So they're about to get plastered, just like the top right there. That's it. So now let's talk about insulation. Dun, 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 dun. Because yes, Hyper-Adobe is excellent thermal mass, but it does not offer very good insulation. So unfortunately, because I, didn't know a lot, I had a lot of gaps in my structure. So I decided to go with the dreaded spray foam. People joked and called it hot flamin' Cheeto Adobe now. And it was a bear of a project to get prepped for. Spray foam was so much work. Oh my gosh. To prepare, you had to put plastic everywhere and tape everywhere and just protect everything that you wanted to protect. And I had to do the whole fascia and underside of the, the roof there. And it was just such a big deal. I had to dig a whole new trench to insulate 2 feet into the ground. And oh my gosh, it was so much work. I don't really advise it. It's not environmentally friendly at all. I now advise pumice or scoria bag to insulate your natural home instead of spray foam. But it had its benefits, offering a very good seal of the structure. So, to each his own. I also got to paint it purple. One unique feature of this house was something I call the megaphone. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 2 wing walls that are used as an entrance to the house, and I wanted to cover it somehow, but one limitation of building with earth is that you have to be sort of stable and have a good foundation. You can't do crazy whirly designs or any shape you want. But with a little bit of rebar and lath and cement, you can.
October 2022, I have finished the whole house, practically speaking. It has shelving, it has a wood stove, it stays warm even in the bitter high desert winters, and I am just so grateful and so happy. It's given me a sense of security, like I could go out into the world and no matter what happens out there, I can come home, be warm, and have somewhere to really come home to. So that's allowed me to take more creative risks and meet more interesting types of people that take that lifestyle, use it to do their art, make music. It's been a stepping stool for being able to do even bigger and better things.